cloacas now.
Yeah,
No,
that's right.
I clicked the sound on just as you said that.
Oh.
Welcome to the 1 or 200 live stream.
Do you think Chi Chi likes Cloaca in particular, or does she like Piccolo for who he is as a person, and she's just not fussed?
I think
this
I
and
think
other
really...
conversations is what we're bringing to this tribute stream.
Yeah, that's right. Nobody else on the internet is telling the truth
like
this because of wokeness, okay?
Yeah.
It's a real in spite of cloaca situation, I think.
Okay, yeah, I get you. Yeah.
Anyway, back to Kyle.
Yeah, so we are live and the audio is working now. Welcome, everybody.
Yay.
Ouch.
Yeah, sound. And you got to hear all kinds of fantastic things come out of the guests' mouths. And that's good because nothing's going to come out of my mouth that is good tonight.
Simple and clean.
I'm not able to function with this range of inputs at the same time as trying to operate Streamlabs, apparently. Fortunately, I've got 3 fantastic Toriyama experts on the call with me. Because I'm certainly not. Big fan in particular of the impact that Akira Toriyama has had on the anime and manga industry, but came to Dragon Ball late, and so don't have the same kind of nostalgic connections as other people. I actually came to Dragon Ball via One Piece and Naruto, which were Ichiro Oda and Masashi Kishimoto, who were proteges of Toriyama. But Simon,
yes,
am
I in trouble?
Gigi, you're on that podcast as well, right? You're both part of...
No, I've never been.
Oh, you've never
been? I just won a contest.
No, that's Imogen. Don't mention... No, we can't say that.
All right, we won't say that. Simon, you are the co-host of the incredible podcast, Gohan or Go Home.
We're a very mediocre podcast that gets fantastic guests. I don't know how, but people just agree to go on.
Look, it's the same as us. Tell me about Toriyama. Tell me about this dude.
You're so good at questions, Kyle. Thank you.
It wasn't a question. It was a requirement.
It was a demand.
I'll be a good boy. It's okay. I can be a good boy on stream for you. I just want to clarify that Gigi is from a podcast called Post Ponies, but was the first Patreon subscriber to Gohan or Go Home. It's one of the big reasons why we can do what we do, which is fantastic. I.e. pay for SoundCloud monthly. Yeah, subscribe to that. Toriyama Akira began his career not in manga at all. He was in advertising, actually, and he was an advertising illustrator, which is, I think, one of the things, this is just kind of my theory about something that has happened in particular to anime, but also in manga, is that oftentimes artists study the people who were... They're like fans, right? They study the people who did the artwork before them. But Toriyama was so inventive and creative because he was drawing from life. And because what he pulled from was things that he liked that weren't really insular within anime. He wasn't just like a Tezuka fan. He really liked, for example, Jackie Chan movies, and so he pulls from Kung Fu. He likes Chinese historical novels, so Journey to the West is a big thing. So when you look at his designs, and I think Jenny's going to talk about this as well, like Chrono Trigger and Dragon Quest, you can see that the mind that comes up with something like a slime isn't just replicating like something from Lucky Star that he's seen and grown up, kind of looking at like a Moe Moe girl, right? Toriyama starts, he sort of turns his mind to manga because he's not in love with his career, right? And he thinks that he likes this and he wants to bring joy to people. He's a bit of a little, a fun little guy, you know, what we might call a virtuous pervert, maybe. And he wants to share that with the world in a really innocent way. At the time that he starts entering his one-shots into the monthly prize competitions, like I think the Tezuka prize existed at the time, and Shonen Jump. Shonen Jump is like a boys' magazine, as the name suggests. Shonen is like boy in Japanese, but it's also it's a very manly man masculinity kind of centered thing, and we might not necessarily recognize the depictions of masculinity in this day and age, but he was essentially what we're seeing at the time is a lot of like homosociality in the comics that existed at the time, and a lot of designs centered around really similar kinds of ways of portraying that. And he comes in with a gag manga, which, other than Kinnikuman, wasn't really present in the magazine at the time. So he enters a lot of one-shots, which are like single chapters that tell a cohesive story. And he does that several times until, I'm not sure how many, but 8, 9, or 10th one gets picked up for serialization by the editing committee, and that is Dr. Slump. While he's doing Dr. Slump, he also continues to do other one-shots, including something called Dragon Boy, which ended up being one of the bases for the character of Goku, right? When he ends up shifting to Dragon Ball after Dr. Slump finishes. What's not known to us, I think, as much in the West, quote unquote. If I can talk like Jordan Peterson and say there's Western culture. We kind of come to Dragon
Horrible!
Ball
Don't do that again.
through Dragon Ball Z. I can cry about the feminine dragon. Bulma is so mean to Goku. She shoots him in the first chapter. It's terrible. Young boys read it and they grow up and they expect to be shot by a hot lady with a nice ass. So we're kind of used to I think Dragon Ball Z. In fact, my first exposure to Dragon Ball was through the video games, Tenkaichi Budokai. Wait, what's it called? Just the Budokai games, right?
No, Budokai Tenkaichi. Yeah.
This is right, yeah. And which was also my first exposure to. Let's not get into some of that. But that was really my first sort of introduction to the series, as well as my brother Tim going into a Kamehameha competition at Armageddon 2003. Which he did not succeed at, unfortunately. But we do have home videotape of him practicing in the hallway, which is really fun. And we think of Dragon Ball as Z. And I think a lot of people expect that Toriyama shot to fame through Dragon Ball originally. But in fact, he was already a household name through Dr. Slump, which was just a phenomenon in Japan. And obviously, Dragon Ball continued to bring Shonen Jump to its absolute zenith peak of publications, right? Maybe One Piece in the early 2000s might have matched it, but you have to understand. Does anybody know how Shonen Jump's like serialization process works? Like how works get picked up and then dropped?
I do, but our audience might not.
Yeah, at least somewhat vaguely. Yeah.
Right. So there's voting. If at the back of Shonen Jump, I think at the back, I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've flipped through one. But they have a little card that you fill out, which is a questionnaire, and they ask you like what manga did you like, and you get to rank them. And then you can send that in and mail it in. So what they do is they receive all of them in at Shueisha. They count the first 1,000, and then that's their sample size. And if you are successfully across several weeks in like place number 23 or something, your work is kind of likely to get dropped at the next big serialization meeting with the head editors. At the peak of the Frieza arc of Dragon Ball, Toriyama was getting like 900 and something votes out of 1,000. In a magazine full of 20-something manga, right? Like, it's impossible to overstate how massive that was. But Dr. Slump was also a hit that was not quite unprecedented, but a solid big hit in Japan, and its cultural influences felt to the extent that he kind of cribs from himself from time to time in Dragon Ball, and you can kind of see a little chapter in Dragon Ball where he goes, to the village in Dr. Slump, or Arale shows up or something like that. Something that might be quite confusing to us. But Dragon Ball wasn't just his start. Like he changed Shonen Jump from the beginning, and then he introduced a second gag manga, which became the template as it evolved into a kung fu power manga, and a kind of one about a new kind of masculinity, which would become the template for all of the big three throughout the 2000s, and then lead to kind of the way that Shonen Jump looks today. So he reinvented it twice, and in other media, he changed them irrevocably. So he changed manga irrevocably, he changed anime irrevocably, by proxy, and video games as well. And I wonder if you want to talk about that a bit, Jenny, and his influence there with design.
Can do, if you want to smash cut to me. I wanted to talk maybe just like a little bit more about the impact of Dr. Slump, because as you said, I feel like and I really hate being like, in the West, we didn't know what was going on. But I think it's important to note from a character perspective, that Arale has probably one of the most like storied legacies in terms of the character that Toriyama has created, who is not from his main Dragon Ball Z franchise. Like Arale has been a really important character in pop culture to the point where, and this is where the Jackie Chan thing kind of comes full circle. So as you know, like Toriyama was really inspired by Jackie Chan and by kung fu films like that. And you'll be pleased to know that in the Hong Kong comedy film My Lucky Stars, which has Jackie Chan in it, he actually dresses up as Arale to kick ass.
Yeah.
So it's a really, really neat, like, full circle moment. Even though, for a number of reasons, it was a Hong Kong comedy film set in Japan, and the whole thing was like, Jackie Chan's going to catch some Yakuza criminals. So obviously there are some elements there which we would not really, I guess if we did like a 2023 version now, I don't know if we could do that. 2024 version, we could do a remake of My Lucky Stars. But I think it's really important that to note that Arale as a character, and I think this will be a theme for most of what we discussed during this live stream when it comes to Toriyama's characters, is it's not just a distinctive design palette and style that makes these characters so influential. I think there's just something about the way that they are embodied with a humanity despite looking so strange, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like Toriyama's designs, his most distinctive designs, are always for characters that you consider to be out of this world, sometimes quite literally, genetically out of this world. But there is always something so humanistic about the design, so empathetic. There's always little quirks of characters here, whether it's the clothes that they wear or the mannerisms that they have. There's something that makes all of these strange looking people, strange looking creatures almost so endearing. Whether it's the slime from Dragon Quest, or it's Arale, or it's one of his many, 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 many famous Dragon Ball Z characters, and Chrono Trigger designs as well. I think there's just something that's so immediately recognizable about a Toriyama character, A, and then B, something so compelling about one. And I feel like Arale is a really good example of that in terms of a character who has crossed most of the pan-East Asian markets while she was really, really popular during this time of serialization. When, as Simon just said, like, imagine thinking about this character from like a consumer perspective, right? Like, you see this character and she is maybe like 4 to 10 pages potentially of like a small chapter in a serialized manga collection of 20 plus stories. But this character had such a huge impact that her appeal crossed Asian markets at the time. And she wasn't even like a mascot character, which were immensely popular. She wasn't, for all intents and purposes, a really popular like game character either. She was just Arale. And I would say that in an age where the most popular characters that were being created and drawn were being created for young boys, like shonen boys and stuff, having Arale as a character who sort of stood the test of time was really, really interesting. And I think that we'll find that as we look at some of the characters that Toriyama has created that are not male presenting, I think it's interesting to think of them in a way where, as we say, he is like almost a lovable pervert, I suppose. But there's just something about the way that he draws and characterizes these female presenting characters that I find so endearing and so charming. And it's almost like what's the word? It's not quite the, like, you know, that really overused meme from Cowboy Bebop where he's like, "Oh, I just love a woman that can kill me and like kick my ass and stuff."
Okay,
like,
let's not say overuse, all right?
I think that one's rather appropriately used.
I will not name names as to who on the pod is invested in me legitimizing that meme. But I will say this. I feel like there's obviously multiple ways to experience or enjoy your ass being kicked by a woman vastly stronger than you. And I would say the woman that Spike is picturing is a different flavor to the one that Toriyama is drawing, but they are both united under the same beautiful umbrella.
Wow.
So I know.
What a touching thought.
I know.
Yeah,
all
and it's
that
something to
ladies.
note as well that when he explodes the popularity of Shonen Jump, it's not because he's reaching a population of more boys being popped out. It's because suddenly Shonen Jump is being bought by girls as well. And it's not to say Toriyama doesn't have like misogyny in his work, or he's not working within a kind of patriarchal, unquestioned rubric, but he loves people. He likes human people, and that humanism just kind of shines through in his female characters, I think. however
Yeah.
imperfectly.
Wow,
Kyle.
we hit dead air.
Mhm.
I was just listening in. I had no thoughts here.
Okay, well, we're not allowed
No
to say
thought.
half the things that I want to say, okay? So that's why.
So we entered
Yeah.
that part of the conversation. We're going to talk about some of the video game stuff as well. So you mentioned the slime from Dragon Quest, but how did that kind of stuff develop in that direction? Kind of following on from his manga.
Do you want to start with this one, Simon, or?
Oh, no. I think you're the video game expert.
That sounds like a slur.
I've just seen, well, it kind of is, honey. I've just seen Yusha Yoshihiko. I haven't actually played Dragon Quest, which, yeah, no, again, it's really influential in all of JRPGs, right? If you've ever seen Sword Art Online, there's a moment where Kirito, the main character, is like, oh, so this character is a low level, like a slime. And what he means is Dragon Quest, but it becomes ubiquitous in the world, right? You know, it's a shorthand for every other JRPG. I'm so sorry that I'm kind of trailing off, but I'm trying to watercolor at the same time.
Oh, he's doing some Dragon Ball fan art in the background, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk about the slime for a little bit, in terms of why I think it's so important to character design. As Simon just said, it's really, really ubiquitous with JRPGs and with, I guess, progression in role-playing games, like in general. And I would say that, just for some context of the Dragon Quest original slime, so the very first time we saw the slime was in the original Dragon Quest, which was the Famicom Dragon Quest in 1986, I think. And it's basically like the first enemy that you see in this Dragon Quest game. And they're really, really cute. But I feel like the first monster that you see in a game is always like terrifying, despite how adorable or friend-shaped it might actually be. And I think that there's something about the design of the slime where it's so adorable, but it is so alien that it sets off that danger sense in your brain still. Like you're like, oh, this thing it looks like a friend, but it is definitely going to corrode me and destroy me. But the slime itself was actually inspired by a PC game called Wizardry. I don't know if anyone actually has heard about this, but it's like a dungeon crawling RPG. And it is a Western game, and it was created by two white dudes, I think. I assume.
Represent.
I assume two white men created this, but it actually really, really influenced Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest in terms of character design. And so apparently, Yuji Horii, who is the creator of Dragon Quest, and Toriyama were apparently working on character designs at the same time, and they both independently drew this blob. They independently drew like a strange alien blob,
like
and they took it to each other.
but like
They took it to each other in like the design room, and they were like, "Hey, look what I drew!" And they were both like, "Oh, what the fuck?" Like, cool. And then Toriyama basically like fleshed it out into the slime that it is today. And there's actually been what's the word? There's been a lot of copies or like images of the slime from in its original state. So like I think there's a tweet going around the internet somewhere of the original slime as drawn by Yuji Horii, and it's basically like a little thing.
Yeah, I just found it. I was looking
So
for
Yuji
it.
Horii draws the one on the left, and then Toriyama's like, yeah, I too thought about a slime. Toriyama's like, hey, actually, it's this thing on the right. And it's just so amazing to me that they both had exactly the same concept, and they were inspired by the same thing. They turned out so different. And Toriyama looked at that pile of goo and was like, okay, here's how it's going to work visually in this game that we're basically coming up with together. And he drew that slime, which you see on the right, which is basically the most beautiful, recognizable design ever. And all that Horii had told Toriyama was, it's going to be jelly-like, it's going to be like goo, and it's going to suffocate people to death. And then he drew this teardrop-shaped thing. And I think that is a really prime example of what made Toriyama so valuable as a collaborator and a creator. I think is he had this really, really beautiful ability to take direction or take the inspiration that his creative counterparts had and come up with something that was so visually different in his own unique style, but somehow something that was still so, and I hate this advertising word, but something that was still so close to the brief in terms of execution. And maybe part of that is his work as an advertising illustrator. But I feel like Toriyama takes the brief from the team or the agency and then like does some little freak shit to it and then comes up with something beautiful. And that to me is just magic. You know, like it's something about it which makes it, and these enemies and so many of his designs, I say, like if you look at, he even drew like his own, he would draw little portraits of the people involved with the game, like Dragon Quest, and he released them alongside monster drawings in Dragon Quest Illustrations, which was like an anthology of designs, basically. And if you look at the way that he drew everyone, including himself, as like NPCs alongside these enemies, there's just this sense of otherworldliness that makes it so clear in design whether or not someone is an NPC or an enemy or like a character part of the main cast. And it's just so charming and so uniquely him. And I think that there are many people that try and ape the style, but he really is the original person who came up with this slime. And if you think about it, like this slime concept of like a low-level, cute, round-shaped monster, like that has been disseminated, as Carl was saying, everyone was saying before, throughout JRPGs. Like we have the mushroom version in MapleStory, and MapleStory has their own slimes too, you know. And it's not just like here's a blue enemy that you see one time. Like Toriyama's mind, he was like, no, there's gonna be a hierarchy of slimes. We're gonna have like one with a crown on. It'll be like the king slime, and like these like little demarcators give so much character to these designs that are really just two huge eyes and a teardrop, and that's it. But these little touches which he adds to not just enemies but also like to NPCs, to characters, these things which give them like human structure, these anthropomorphic qualities, they're just so charming. And I think that that's why the slime has endured as both like a type of design, not just like a type of design or a type of enemy, but also like a, I guess like a staple of the JRPG genre, like its own little hierarchy. So yeah, I find it really interesting about the slime. Slime history for you guys.
I tried to share an image during that, and I think I just broke the stream for a little bit. So apologies to everyone.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
No, it was from me trying to share.
Well.
And so I don't know how I'm going to share anything picture-wise. So you're just going to have to imagine things in your head.
I was just going to say, to anybody who doesn't know what a portrait drawing is, it's like a Funko Pop, but in 2 dimensions. Yeah. Just for any of you real nerds out there who are in geekdom with us.
Wow. You're saying 2D Funko Pop.
You're saying, Jenny, that a lot of people have tried to copy the Toriyama
None
style.
have succeeded.
None have succeeded so far. And a large part of that is, you know, everyone watching it in the West through the 90s and early 2000s was actively trying to draw Gokus. And you had a whole range of, like, how to draw manga, which were just, like, how to draw Toriyama art. You know, that's still the case. You know, you still have a range of materials out there like that. It's incredible.
I mean, Kishimoto started drawing. Kishimoto, who did Naruto famously, started drawing pictures of Arale in a similar fashion. So, like a little bit before everyone was trying to draw Goku's, I guess. But you know, similar sort of thing of like drawing pictures of this and going like trying to nail down on a character. I sound so stupid. No. But and yeah, going back to the Arale thing, it really is interesting because like Dr. Slump has 0 impact in the West. It almost like there's not a surviving dub, there's not a very big release of the manga, there's like nothing. And Toriyama, I don't know where I was going with this. Something I think
places.
Simon, you were telling me this earlier
Oh, that is probably
about
not true.
it's the thing about how Toriyama designs characters then to go similar to the Dragon Quest thing, where with Dragon Ball, Toriyama optimized workflow to work with basically like only one assistant, where it's very common to have like 3 or 4 in manga.
Yeah. So, whoa, this covers a lot of things, but what I think is really interesting about Toriyama is he's often called a genius in Japan. Like the concept of tensai in Japan is like it translates as genius, but they have like a different concept of talent, I think, to we do, because they have different ideological kind of constructs of what's there's a kind of eugenicist belief that you are born a certain way, if that makes sense, rather than nurturing talent, which is really funny.
Yeah, we definitely don't have
obviously,
that in the West.
Well, it's
Absolutely
different.
not.
It's different. It's hard to explain. We don't have to get into how the frameworks differ, but it's kind of interesting because Toriyama himself would call it laziness. He described himself as a procrastinator and being lazy, and so he was like, "That's why when I moved from first form cell to second form cell, I was like, I'm not coloring in all of these spots. They can be left open without inking them." Like, but what's kind of interesting about his instinct for doing that is that his route for being able to imagine, and I think because he spent 5 days out of the 7 that he was allotted to draw each 14 pages of chapters, not doing the work and just kind of sitting back and thinking and percolating, that he was able to boil everything down to its bare essentials. And it is really difficult to make a character design that is simple, which communicates. Like,
Extremely.
you can make a character design which is simple, but it's a smiley face or something like that, which is also genius, but it's been done before, right? But it's really
the
hard to
Dragon
do
Quest
something.
slime.
Yeah. Like, it's the Dragon Quest slime to compress everything into that simple an idea with that few amount of strokes is just. Okay, I'm suppressing some jokes right now. Is like it's extremely difficult to do. And what I was kind of talking to Gigi about off stream a couple of days ago was that Toriyama, I don't know about famously, but he worked with only ever one assistant and sometimes with no assistants, which is really uncommon in the industry, because to churn out the sheer amount of pages that you need to do each week, you've got to have people. If you look at like Oba and Obata, they split the people who wrote Death Note. They split the writing and the drawing, and one of them, I can't remember which one is the artist, has like, the huge number of assistants helping because the drawings are so complicated and because what they're going for is a kind of like realistic stylization, right? Toriyama uses almost no screen tone in Dragon Ball, but he always communicates everything clearly, and everything is delineated really clearly. As much as I think One Piece is really popular and we might praise the art for certain other things, you look at any random page and it's so busy and it's so hard to tell what's going on. But Toriyama respects, I think this probably comes from his love for cinema, but he respects the 180 line, for example, when he draws three-dimensional fights, something that almost nobody was doing in Shonen Jump, something that his editor Torishima would kind of point out as the popularity of Dragon Ball. He's able to make you always understand when your eye goes to the next panel what's going on and where to look and where you're always situated at any one time, because of the simplicity of it. And that's really difficult to do. If he doesn't need a background, he's not going to draw one, right? But then he needs to situate you in place and time later, and then he does it again, and it's always like some sort of really interesting, fascinating idea that he's come up with. Even his own architectural kind of concepts, like the bubble houses on stalks in West City or something, right? Just kind of off the dome.
Yeah. And every time Toriyama draws something like mechanical, like a motorcycle or a ship or something, you can
he's in
tell.
love with his gunpla. He used to have these models of cars and stuff on his desk because he really loves that. He's a real nerd for it. Something that Imogen pointed out to me and pointed out in Go Hana Go Home kind of early on is there's kind of this concept in I think a lot of the art world, especially pop art and stuff, that you choose to get good at like organic stuff, like animal designs, or you get good at mechanical stuff. Toriyama does both, and he kind of effortlessly moves between them in a way that's really fascinating. He integrates a world where there's, talking dinosaurs alongside spaceships and aliens, in a way that just kind of works. If you look at famous, like, adult Goku design around the Frieza arc, for example, just to bring that back again, there's no screen tone. And also, there are a couple. Namek has, I think, 2 or 3 sons, so that it's always daytime, and he never has to draw nighttime, which is really funny. Otherwise, you'd have to ink the sky. He's got his gear's uncolored, his belt is black, and then he has an undershirt which is black. And there's just this perfect balance between, filled and unfilled without needing screen tone, without needing hatching, without needing any sort of shading. He just communicates it, and it's there, and you can see it. And it's always recognizable, and his silhouettes are recognizable as well, which is fucking hard to do, right? In design. And I just think it's genius, right? Not to gas him up too much, but I don't know how you do that. I genuinely don't.
Yeah, I think that's some of that. Oh, sorry. Gigi, go.
No, you go. I was going to say, as much as like people joke about how many Gokus there are in Dragon Ball, the fact that Goku is such a instantly recognizable design, and also when thinking about Toriyama as like a time saver, as like a almost like genius out of laziness, right, and procrastination king. There's a bit in the manga where I believe they are training for Cell or something, but I could be wrong. It's been a while. Where they're like, okay, we have to stay in Super Saiyan for like a week or something. And they're just like doing daily tasks while being Super Saiyan. And the reasoning behind it is partially so that they don't have to color in the hair. You don't have to ink the hair when they're Super Saiyan, right? Because it's blonde. So it saves time.
That was his original concept for the idea. We take it for granted that like power dyes your hair is a really common trope, right? But he's doing it because then he's like, well, now I don't have to fill in the beta, which is like the term for inking, which is what his assistant would do, right? And suddenly they're saving time. So and then when you're doing the fight choreography, you can spend time on other stuff than inking hair. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Frieza's design is simple and streamlined, but it's still like it takes a bit. And Cell is another villain who takes a long time to draw each panel, which I'm sure he was kicking himself about. But speaking of the collaboration, is everybody familiar with the story for how he came to having Cell in that part of the story?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Toriyama's original concept was exactly what it started off as in the androids portion of that story, where he's got Dr. Gero and number 19, right? And his editor Torishima had passed him along to a new editor. So he had the editor Torishima. Editors and mangaka have like a one-to-one kind of relationship at Shueisha most of the time. I mean, like editors will take care of more than one artist, but that's just like that's their contact point. That's the person who represents the publication company and the person who advises them on where the story is to go. And the editor's usually quite powerful and kind of they help to focus the artist, or that's kind of the idea behind the relationship with them, right? Torishima had been his editor since the beginning of Dr. Slump, and I think even before then he'd taken an interest in Toriyama, which is the reason why there is Dr. Mashirito and Dr. Slump, who's a villainous character, because it's a mixing up of the name Torishima, right? He's putting his editor in there to be a nefarious villain, but who sucks. Which is a funny way to do. Like, you have a national publication and you're saying that you're like slagging off your boss in a really fun way, which again, king. I can't say this enough. So he's just passed him along to, I'm not sure if it was, I can't remember if it was, no, I can't remember the editor's name, but he's passed him along to a new editor who's come in after, like so many years of having this relationship with him, which would then change, I think, to a new one in the Boo arc. Like, he went through 2 editors pretty quickly. And Toriyama introduces 19 and 20, and Trunks is a huge hit. He's deliberately sat down and been like, okay, I need someone who's like a powerful warrior, but like a pretty boy, because that's popular as well. And he succeeds, and he makes somebody who launches 1,000, fan fictions, right?
We love a boy in a girl jacket.
We love, honestly, Trunks is like sword lesbian icon. He's goals. She's so iconic. That crop jacket. Anyway, I gotta stop myself. But Torishima calls him up, and remember, he has no power over him. He's not Toriyama's editor anymore, and he's like, what? So the bad guy is an old man in a fatso? What's wrong with you? This isn't interesting. And Toriyama's like, yes, sir, I'll change it straight away, sir. So he comes up with number 17 and 18, who are teens, and they're hip, and they're young, and they dress cool, and they've got, like, 80s leg warmers that are neon colored. And then Torishima's like, what? So it's 2 children now? Children are scary? That's what's going on in the story? And he's like, fuck it, Cell. I'm coming up with Cell. And that's how that story goes through so many twists and turns and changes. And he's improvising week by week with a time travel story, and he makes it work. Just because of personal opinion, I think that portion of the comic is probably my favorite portion of the Z part of it. I just think it's masterful storytelling. I think he's at the height of his powers. But he's getting called up by his editor, his old editor, not even his new one, who's like complaining to him on the phone. And he's just changing the story week by week, and he's making it work. And I don't know how to deal with that information. If that makes sense, as a creative person.
No, I think it makes perfect sense. I understand now. Like that answers some questions. We've got someone in the chat saying this is Android 17 erasure.
In what sense?
She talked about 19 and 20 and 16 and 18? 17
No, 17 and 18.
Ah.
He makes. Yeah.
It's Android 16 erasure.
16 is our
anything.
autism power boy.
Mm-hmm.
This huge bird.
Our big boy who loves birds.
A big boy who loves birds.
We've got
non-binary icon Android 16.
Rockbreaker in the chat as well.
Hi, Lily.
Referencing the story about Frieza being based on landlords.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I don't need to tell this
true?
one. Jenny, you can tell this one if you know it.
I think that's basically it, right?
Well, no, not quite. So in the 90s, in the early 90s, Japan has essentially what happened in 2008 in the United States. It has a huge economic boom and bubble which just busts, which was driven by property speculators. Toriyama sits down in the early 90s and he's like, what's the most evil person? Property speculators. People who are making money off other people's deprivation and a human right. Which, again, is just awesome. And he makes this like an iconic genocidal villain because I don't know if he understands this explicitly, but certainly somewhere in his heart he's making a connection between people who are property speculators and kind of mass corporatized landlordism and the violence of Blackwater, you know? Even though that didn't exist at the time. And that kind of empire, you know, Frieza has an empire. He's an imperialist. You know, and it's all for profit. He's selling off planets, you know? It's for the love of the game and the love of the dollar. Grind every day, don't give up, Sigma mindset Frieza.
That's so bad. I really hate that you said that. Sigma mindset. I hate the existence of Sigma mindset Frieza.
Sigma mindset, much like New Zealand famed politician Judith Collins. Do we have those videos?
Wait, somewhere about I can't share anything because it kills the stream.
Kyle, you're breaking my heart.
Look, you just have to put them on the TikTok. You have to put them on the TikTok and everyone can see them.
We'll link them. We'll link the TikTok clip that has some of them, I guess, in whatever wrap-up we do, whatever wrap-up tweet of Skeet.
And the winter wrap-up,
Blue Sky tweets are called Skeets, but whatever Skeet we end up doing, we'll put a TikTok link
I
in
love
there.
it because I'm sick and twisted in Joker mode.
I'm turning into the Joker listening to you call yourself.
Turning into the Joker. Blue Sky, calling something a skate is normal to me, actually, because I'm the damn
Don't
Joker.
call them that, eh? Just,
You are the Joker. It's horrific. Before we get too sidetracked about Simon being the literal Joker, I wanted to talk for a second just to bring it back in terms of like character design and art style. And I wanted to say that in terms of the point Simon was making about Toriyama's eye for space, and also like his particular penchant for drawing. Is it penchant or penchant? English is not my first language, whatever. His penchant for drawing characters with very distinctive designs, ranging from huge himbo autism friend to like slender Twinkie lesbian who definitely wears jog straps. There are other character types, obviously, but those are the two that come to mind for me immediately. I was going to say, Toriyama was actually really, really inspired by Star Wars. And, like, I am not a Star Wars lover. I'm going to tell you guys that right now. I'm not a Star Wars supporter. I'm not a Star Wars lover. But I feel that the one thing the original Star Wars did really well was have very distinctive looks for each of its main characters. Like this is like the 1977 Star Wars, not like the other stuff that came after that. And if you think about the mechanics specifically of the engines and the spaceships and the otherworldly machinery in Star Wars, a lot of those were actually World War II inspired, like inspired by real machines from World War II. This is where women like write in saying that I'm an incel, because I know about this. But a lot of the designs for ships in Star Wars, the original Star Wars anyway, were really, really heavily based on like Boeing B-29 like heavy bombers and stuff like that from World War II. And one thing I would say about Toriyama's ability to draw and to infuse so much life into some of his mechanical designs is the incredible amount of detail that he put into drawing machines of all kinds. Like whether it's like cogs wheels, it's motorcycles, it's cars, anything. Like I think it was
It's the inside of androids.
Inside of androids, yeah, exactly. Because I think we may have mentioned this, that he designed for the film Crusher Joe in the early part of his career, alongside other really cool designers like Otomo and Takahashi and stuff. And he drew so many machines in that. And it was very much like a Studio Nue style, who were basically like Macross before Macross was cool, sort of thing. And he drew so many cool machines and tanks, and all of these machines and tanks were based off real World War II French tanks or British tanks, for example. And he would come up with his own military design that would be a very distinct mashup of like European World War II tanks or planes or submarines or boats. And I think there's a foreword to some of that work that he did, which says, you know, like, I really like that. I really committed drawing this tank, but like it fucking sucked. Like I hate drawing this tank. It's like the worst thing I've done in my entire life. But he committed to doing it like time and time again. And I think that is sort of one thing which I've always really found was an enduring thread in his work, is he has this ability to alchemize or synthesize these existing things that we already know and associate with humanity and with history, and to make them something so distinctly his own, without compromising on the detail or any of the like design related grit or any of the, I guess, like, what's the word? For all that we say that he was a genius lazy king, which I agree with and I support 100%. I think there are also so many instances of his work where Toriyama could have taken a shortcut when it came to drawing the individual spokes of a wheel on a scooter, but just never did. You know? And I think that it's that decision making, right? It's like imbuing these mechanical objects with all this detail, which enhances the life within them, and then also being really selective about what features you would highlight on a humanoid or a creature. And in that situation, less actually is more. Like he was so adept at bringing life to both the mechanical and the human that it was really quite impressive. And that he did that in such he did that making two very different design choices for each type of medium. I find that really, really inspiring and really, really kind of, I guess, specific to his work, I think. Yeah.
That's it. That's a wrap. We're done.
I didn't get to shoot off any of my good stuff. Don't clip that part. That's not good.
So shooting out.
If
They
it
call
is,
me
it
the
is.
Spider-Man of podcasting because I'm a metaphor for puberty. All right.
I can't with this.
I got the web slinging supplements, man.
No.
I'll make this whole place
All
dark.
right.
The web stack.
We're off the railroad. We're on the tracks.
Spider-Man, white out the room.
Everyone's just really emotional about this, and so they can't help themselves but act out.
That's right. How late is it for you, by the way, Gigi?
Oh, it is 3:19 a.m.
Holy.
Well, thank you for joining us.
shit.
Yeah, it was daylight
very
savings,
good.
so my sleep schedule got messed up anyway.
It's
But I
not
always
finished. Oh, sorry. No, please.
Yeah. I always did say that if left to my own devices, I would have the like sleep schedule of a somewhat well-adjusted person in New Zealand. It's just that I'm living on the east coast of America.
Yeah, you've always said that. You always knew what New Zealand was before I met you, of course.
It's
I don't think
true.
I don't think I
I
know a
watched
single
Flight of the
well-adjusted
Conchords.
New Zealand person, so that's amazing. That's a sleep schedule that you're aspiring to have.
You're saying before
Honestly,
that
I would love to be well adjusted.
a lot of the Toriyama stuff it never really got a Western release, but you can actually access it all now on Viz. There are all official translations
really?
now of the entirety of Doctor Slump. Of
That's awesome.
Toriyama's manga theater as well, like some of his shorts.
I think Sandland is on there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Wasn't
a bunch of stuff there.
there something coming out for Sandland soon too, like a new adaptation?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think they said that they were going to do something. There's Sandland the series that launches in like 9 days, I think.
Oh
and
wow, that soon.
Yeah, so it's a new adaptation called Sandland the series, and they're going to have 2 chapters, the Demon Prince and the Angel Hero, unless I'm misreading that Japanese and it actually means something else. It's going to be on Disney Plus.
Oh, it's a
Yeah. Disney Plus and Hulu.
Interesting.
Cool.
Apparently.
Check that out. Good time is there to check it out. Yeah.
Oh gosh, can I tell you how I came to using the tools that I do when I do comics?
Yeah.
Because it involves
yes.
Is it fucking relevant?
I know this
If
story.
so, yes.
Yeah, it is extremely relevant.
Okay,
It's super
fantastic.
relevant.
I was struggling for a little bit with how to get, when I was kind of doing more manga style comics, the mix of their kind of like sort of thin detail moving to the kind of thicker lines, because oftentimes when you use either a fine liner or you use a kind of standard I don't know what you call it, like a calligraphy nib or something like that, they're really stiff. They oftentimes have a very consistent line, or they have something which is kind of rounded, or it's this kind of like flat slant, which is good for writing, but it doesn't really make sense. And I remember kind of struggling with that for a little bit. And one night I had a dream, and in that dream, I can't believe I'm telling this on the live stream. In that dream, I was at the year-end Shonen Jump New Year's party. I don't know why. I don't know how I got in. But I remember going around and I ended up bumping into Toriyama, and I didn't know that it was him at first. And I had a conversation with him. And I remember just talking about the struggle a little bit. And I was like, I can't get this to work. Like, I'm trying this or whatever. And he goes, have you tried using a G-nib? And I was like, I don't know what that is, man, but okay. And then I found out he was Toriyama, and then I was like, fuck, I can't talk anymore. I remember I woke up. I went and I got one because I was living in Japan at the time, and I started using it, and lo and behold, that was the key. And I had to learn to master it, but that was the key. Thank you, Dream Toriyama, forever and always.
That's powerful.
For helping me to make better comics.
Holy shit, that's the best creative origin story I've heard in my entire life. You were like, in your dream, you were like the only quirked up white boy at the show.
No, there was someone else there. There was my friend was there as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
Two quirked up white boys at the Shonen Jump function.
And Toriyama helped me to be goated with the sauce.
Yeah, Toriyama
Quirked
literally
up
was
white
like...
Wow.
But I was not busting it down sexual style.
No?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
White boy stuns Japanese
would you have said on
manga
stream
artist.
if you had?
Sorry?
Nothing.
What was that? Would I have said on stream?
No, let's ignore it. That really speaks to like the impact of the guy, though. So when he shows up as like a named character in a dream and gives you relevant advice.
He does it, and you know what? Because he was essentially a Force ghost, he can continue to do that, even though he has passed into the other world. Toriyama to this day is giving artists advice in their dreams as we speak.
Incredible, and I hope
He's like the Santa of manga tools.
Yeah, it's crazy that he was in the middle of so much work. Still, he's I think he's only 68. And Super was ongoing. I think he was just writing for it. There's a new artist.
Yeah, Toyotaro, right?
Yeah, and he was doing some stuff for Sandland, but man, yeah, it's like it's had such a huge impact in Japan, but also just everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Because again, like you think about Doctor Slump, pretty big manga, and then Dragon Ball, obviously one of the biggest media properties in the world. Like, that's a pretty non-controversial statement, right?
it's
Because
incredibly
everybody
non-controversial.
knows Dragon Ball.
They call it a
But then
universal
you also
language.
have
Like,
the universal language of Goku.
All men are brothers. All men are Goku lovers.
But then also Dragon Quest, one of the biggest video game franchises in the world, especially like in Japan, you know. For one person to be so integral, like either the creator or in Dragon Quest, like a large part of the success of it, it's absolutely ridiculous.
do you think it's like too much to say that he was the modern day bridge between Tezuka and modern day anime and manga?
Tezuka considered him that.
Oh well, okay.
Yeah.
If you wanted to know.
There you go.
I didn't know.
Toriyama was also one of the judges. I think for a long time he was the head judge of the Tezuka Prize at Shonen Jump. So
He was acting committee chair during Fujio Akatsuka's like illness and all.
Yeah, and like it's wild to think like people still reference Tezuka pretty frequently. Like the impact of Toriyama is going to go on for like centuries, well, as long as humans are still around. And there's so much more of it was able to be pushed out via animation to a much wider audience than a lot of Tezuka stuff ever was. It was many people's first encounter with anime and manga.
For me, my first encounters with anime and manga were watching Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon in like early mornings before school to have a moment, a real American moment. They were on at like 6 and 6:30, and I was leaving for school at around like 7:30 or so for like elementary. Actually, that's a normal time. It's in high school where it got really weird. High school, it started at like 7, but I was still like up super early. And Dragon Ball was like part of a reason to get up super early for it.
It was after school here.
Everybody watched it.
I think it was after school.
Really?
Here. It was like 4 p.m., so you try and rush home from school to see it.
Yeah.
I saw episodes every now and then. But like I said near the beginning of the live stream, it wasn't what brought me to anime and manga. Is this like maybe this is like bad to say on this live stream, but dubbed versions of these shows have always like really irritated me, even as a kid. So everyone else was like going. Like I knew Dragon Ball was everywhere, right? Like,
right.
Everyone else was watching it, and so I'd know what was happening whether I watched it or not. But for years that was a turn-off for me. I didn't read Dragon Ball until I was like in my late teens. When I was able to read an official translation. But I still remember everyone like coming to school and talking about yesterday afternoon's Dragon Ball episode. Like I knew the entire story before I ever read it or watched it.
Yeah, I mean the thing with what you said about the dubs for Dragon Ball is obviously like it's a dub being done in the 90s, and those are historically extremely hit or miss, right? Like the shows that people remember now are either like Dragon Ball, but like there's like a few anime that came out at around that time that have like amazing dubs and everyone really likes that, and then for everything else, people generally go for subs. There's only a few shows where it's like the people that are in there will say like, oh yeah, you can watch the dub for this. It's a good dub, you know.
I mean, the dub voices for Dragon Ball are also totally iconic, right?
Yeah, extremely. But like it definitely has a sort of thing about it that is like a 90s dub jank, you know? If that makes sense.
One of the weirdest Toriyama moments of my life, I guess one step removed from Toriyama himself, maybe 2 or 3 steps, was going to an Armageddon expo here in New Zealand and having a couple of the voice actors turn up and hearing like Frieza's voice across a crowded amphitheater. Just I haven't seen it come out of a human's mouth. Like,
No, it's always so interesting to like hear a voice actor do the voice in person. At a different convention recently, this isn't Dragon Ball, but like a similar phenomenon. I saw Shihori, who is a mostly like singer in Japan, do like Japanese moe girl voice in person live, and I'm like, oh, that comes out of a person. Oh, that's weird. So I can only imagine something like Frieza that just booming across an auditorium, or someone doing like actual Goku or whatever.
Yeah, very, very moment of disjunction.
For Japanese voices, Norio Wakamoto is just out there and could do Cell at any time.
when Wakamoto Norio was dubbing for Dragon Ball, obviously like dubbing is one of the later parts that happens in the animation thing, so he was still practicing his lines at home while the first episodes of Cell were coming out and airing, and the kids outside would hear him practicing and say, "Come out and fight us, Cell! Come out and fight us!" And he would come out and do the voice for them.
That's so good.
that rules.
Yeah. That rules so hard.
He's so good.
Dudes rock.
Yeah. Nobody has been as bugger man as him.
What else we got? What else we got in the tank, folks?
What else we got? We can talk about the tributes to Toriyama that have been out, I guess, because we are technically doing a tribute live stream ourselves. But I know how one of my friends actually found out that Toriyama had passed was because they were in Final Fantasy 14 and people were holding vigils in FF14 where their characters would dress up as iconic characters from like Chrono Trigger, from Dragon Quest, and from Dragon Ball Z, and you would have all these people dressed as Goku or as Frieza, or you know, there's I think FF14 had the GQ collab, so people had like the slime hats and stuff, right? You know, from when we were playing a couple of years ago. And they would just hold these vigils, and they would have like sit-ins basically all around different servers across different data centers, whether it's like Europe or Asia or North America. It didn't matter where, but it was really like a really global, truly global phenomenon. And I mean, like, just over here, I'm in Japan at the moment, and then at just like a really innocuous sort of like, I guess, anime crossover portion where there's like pop-up stores in like a local mall, for example, and they have Dragon Quest and they've got Dragon Ball cutouts and stuff. People, you know, like people were gathering around, like no one was taking any photos. Like someone tried to take a photo of it. Some local old dude was like, "Don't do that, stop it." And like people were like leaving sweets and stuff. Like, you know, like I think it's clear that he has had a huge impact. I went to an Anisong cafe and they were having Toriyama tributes. I went to a random bar and I got a Dragon Ball colored drink that looked like it was going to kill me. But
wait, what color is Dragon Ball? Like of the Dragon Ball itself?
Well, there are multiple Dragon Balls.
Yeah. But I mean, what
Dragon's Ball? We pluralize it.
I mean, what color was it? What color? Do you mean more generally the franchise, or do you
like
mean...
Attorneys General?
Yeah, that's or Daniel's Craig.
Oh my god! No, it was like a bluey green.
Okay.
Bluey.
So, Not
Oh.
Bluey, not Bluey. I know that that's like the
Also
activation
famously
phrase
created by
for
That's
Toriyama.
my
someone here.
Manchurian candidate phrase.
Yeah, Bluey. Um,
Sorry, I
but
don't have her on hand.
I think it really can't be understated just the impact that Toriyama has had and how like even now like people are still not that Twitter is the pinnacle of celebrating anything, but like people are still
Hmm.
talking actively and celebrating his work. Like we just said, like Sandland is coming out. Like it's clear that even if he hadn't passed, I don't want to say that there was a resurgence of his work, but he was clearly so involved and so dear and so integral to the scene in general that I think
Hmm.
it is absolutely clear that, you know, what you observed, Kyle, and what everyone else here has observed as well, is that his legacy, he is Tezuka's heir apparent, right? As Tezuka said so
Hmm.
himself, like this is a man who is going to carry on the legacy of anime and manga for a long, long time. And I don't know why Brazil loves Dragon Ball so much, but they do love Dragon Ball down there in Brazil. And I feel like I've been seeing like videos and stuff like on TikTok and online of there being like someone like driving like it's like a 3 or 4 car like Dragon Ball parade, like driving down like a street just to commemorate Toriyama. And I think it's so cool how people celebrate his work in these wacky creative ways, and I feel like he would have loved every single one of those tributes, you know, especially the ones like FF14 one, which, you know, if you are not online or not a gamer, you could decry as strange, but there is something so, I think, so cool to know that you could unite a player base of what, like 10 million people or something, and
Hmm.
most of those people could be united by their love, and if not love, then respect and recognition for someone who was so key to a genre that they clearly all love. So
Hmm.
I think it's really cool. It's really sad, but also really cool to see that he's gonna be memorialized and has been memorialized in this way. And I feel like things like this, for example, and also the continued existence of
Hmm.
projects like Gohan and Go Home, I think that he is the kind of artist whose work will never lose its charm. There will always be someone who is new to Dragon Ball. I mean, Gohan and Go Home isn't it really meant to be for people who have like never watched it before and are having it kind of like explained to them? Like, you know, it's like almost like introduction podcast type thing. And I kind of feel like the fact that Gohan or Go Home exists in this day and age, considering the age of Dragon Ball as a franchise, that's just testament to how
Hmm.
enduring his work and legacy has been, right? So for as long as we have people that will make products like Gohan or Go Home, and people that will put on slime hats in massively multiplayer online role playing games, that there'll always be a bit of Toriyama left in the world with us. Yeah.
Hmm. I'm thinking about this one time I was wearing an Agretzko t-shirt in a Guitar Center where I live, and this kindergartner came up to me, no adult supervision, and this is like part of a larger story that we do not have time for, but this kid recognized like that there was a Japanese character on my shirt, asked me what it meant, and I forgot at the time, so I said I don't know, but it's from an anime, and the kid like lit up to talk about anime with me, a cool adult. And at one point he was like asking me about different anime that I knew about, and he forgot the name Dragon Ball, so he just said to me, "Do you know Goku?"
A classic. Truly a
And it's
classic.
just seared in my brain.
Yeah. Amazing.
This
And you know what? I do, and
5-year-old
he's my
boy.
friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I know Goku very well.
We go way back.
We go
Like,
way back.
If we look, I guess, from the West and Western comics and animation,
If we journey to the West, yeah.
yeah, I guess that is also something that you could say about Dragon Ball. But you know, we've got I guess, a history of like more power fantasy kind of stuff, which Shonen is always indulged in, obviously. But I think you mentioned this like near the beginning, Jenny. The way in which and maybe you as well, Simon. The way in which he like wrote masculine characters, and kind of coming out of his background in gag manga, was something completely different from anything that we really had here at the time, or at least in terms of big media properties. Like if Superman had been around for a lot longer, but in a lot of ways Goku is the answer to that, and just takes it in a completely different direction. I don't know, like, what impact this stuff has had on a Western, I guess, creator base. But it feels like there's still so much that needs to be transferred, or ideas and concepts that need to move in this direction for creators in the West to even start getting close to some of this work.
Maybe one of the things that I think is so universal about Toriyama is his humanism, which, at least in Dragon Ball I can speak to, comes out in the way that it's not until like 2/3 of the way through the comics run that he really produces an antagonist and a villain who's truly irredeemable, and that's the property speculator Parasite, right? The imperialist. Like, almost everybody that Goku comes into contact with ends up becoming an ally or a friend in some way. In fact, even Frieza toward, the end of Dragon Ball Super's run ends up going on their side briefly for this tournament where they have to sort of survive, and save the universe. And it's just, I think the message that you can go through the world and befriend creatures, which is something Goku does, or you can, people can be redeemed in some way, that there is a path toward making something better and making a better world, if that makes sense, even as things kind of escalate and even as your challenges escalate. That's kind of a universal thing, and I think that oftentimes we think of it as being power fantasy, which kind of is, or as escalation, but really ultimately the thing that ends up winning people is Goku's mercy. It's not that he bests Vegeta when they first encounter each other and beats him up. It's that he spares his life. Otherwise, the redemption couldn't take place. And this is a kind of thematic resonance throughout all of Dragon Ball, as well as everything that can think or can feel is worth something. Android 16 is a character who is built to destroy Goku, but he spends time with the birds and he loves them. And Goku befriends Android 8 in Dragon Ball, who is a Frankenstein's monster-looking character based on, Boris Karloff's performance of that character. And he befriends him because Goku is so naive and so world innocent that he doesn't know you're supposed to shun this person, so he doesn't. And in the early part of Dragon Ball, this is just in filler, but I think it's very much in the spirit of Toriyama's story, and he had a hand in a lot of filler. So if you're like, I hate this filler episode, most likely he had some kind of way, he did a little design for it. He kind of suggested a story to them. Gohan befriends a robot. This is one of my favorite episodes of Dragon Ball, actually, and it's in filler. And the robot can't move because it's stuck in this underground place where he finds it, and he's just a really little child. He's about 4 years old, and he can't do anything, and he learns about death because he befriends this robot, and this robot slowly runs out of power, and that's his first experience with loss. And it's not a person, and it's not a creature, it's something mechanical, but it has life and it has soul. And that's something that I think oftentimes gets missed when we talk about power levels. And that's probably one of the reasons why Dragon Ball resonates across cultures and across societies, because it has a kind of message which is ultimately positive and not in a saccharine way. It's something which has real substantial meaning because it comes from a human root, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's humanity and everything.
And that's not to say that there aren't some Western comic artists and creators who aren't doing good shit, but comparably in terms of media properties, we're talking about superhero comics, right, as being equivalent to stuff in Shonen Jump. So your Marvels and DCs. And even even when their characters are meant to be kind or compassionate, I mean, Superman's whole shtick, it doesn't hit the same way as your Goku's might. And part of that's to do with the way that it's none of these characters are owned by the creators. They're constantly being retconned and rewritten, and all that remains is the power set, more or less. The humanity of those characters disappears, and I think this is somewhat unique to anime, and manga, is that even though like the conditions over there for working aren't the greatest, more or less, the creators get to decide what happens to their character, and you end up with something like this instead of an eternally like 30-year-old superhero who has a whole bunch of spin-offs where he goes super evil, and destroys the entire planet, right? Like with no chance of redemption. And I think that's what kind of draws people into some of this work.
Also, Toriyama's anti-Nazi, which is something that brings the world together.
Whereas
in movie 12, Hitler comes back out of hell because everyone gets released from hell, and the boys do the fusion dance, the little nephews, and they beat the shit out of Hitler. And I've got to say, that's a universal message.
Is that real?
Yes, that actually happens.
That's 100% real.
But also, in the Red Ribbon Army, it's a private paramilitary, right? And General Blue is very obviously an Aryan Nazi. He's also kind of gay because Toriyama's a little bit of a homophobe in the 80s.
Yeah.
But he's also a Nazi.
Yeah, I was going to say, with that Superman example, I think that actually sort of crystallized a little bit a thought that I had in the back of my mind when it comes to, I guess, the motivations behind the motivations that are intrinsic to what I would consider like the Western comic power fantasy of like a Superman versus like, I suppose, an Asian. I almost said the word Oriental. Oh my god, I almost got myself cancelled.
You're allowed. You've got the pass.
Got the O word pass.
Both cancelled. Both cancelled.
I don't know how much longer my camera's gonna last, so can I very quickly, before you continue, Jenny, just show you the little thing that I've been working on?
Oh yeah, let's see it, please. Oh, that's a wall.
Fixing the lighting, fixing the exposure.
Oh,
that's a little thing. That's just me at my desk, and I was wearing a singlet before. You can't see it.
That's a Patreon only stream.
Just looking up, and it's gonna say "Arigato sayonara."
Fantastic.
Oh, that's so sweet. My story. I didn't draw anything. I was just going to talk about Superman really quickly. But when I think about, like, I suppose, like a Western comic book that I immediately recognize or think of, obviously, I have not read every single Western comic book, so no one can cancel me
off the live stream
for not reading every single MCU or whatever the fuck is out there. But, like, I think the difference between something like a Homelander and a Superman versus a Goku is that I feel like the identity of a Homelander and the heritage of like a Homelander or a Superman type is essentially a stand-in for that character's generic motivations. But I would say that the identity and heritage for a character like Goku is an ongoing journey. Like a huge part of Goku's character is actually uncovering his alien, I guess, beginnings. And also having to grapple with that and then to pass on like a positive legacy to Gohan. And I feel like maybe it's just because Superman and Homelander are not like, I don't know, good dads or whatever. But I just feel like the Goku's identity and heritage are obviously an integral part of the character, but they are not like the buck doesn't stop there. They're not like, okay, Goku is like an alien, therefore this is his prescribed moveset and moral behavior, and that will just never change. Whereas I feel like with a Superman or with a Homelander, you've got like this is their background, genetic or otherwise. This is what makes them weak against something else, whether or not it's, mechanical or emotional or whatever. And then that sort of is where it stops. But I feel like exploring these themes of identity, of selfhood, of personality, of responsibility, I think these things are journeys that characters in manga take that are arcs long, right? They're not just like flashback long. These are entire arcs devoted to these characters. And often in modern manga, you'll finish a whole series and then you might not even have a satisfactory explanation for why someone did what they did at the start of a manga. And sometimes, yes, it is just retconning. That totally exists, obviously. But sometimes I do just feel like the exploration of identity is so different, and the approach to it and the treatment of it is so different in a manga like Dragon Ball versus a property like Superman or Batman or whatever. And I think that you're right, Carl, and that there is a distinct difference there. And I feel like, I don't know if this is like I don't know if it's a matter of one industry learning from another. I think it may be like more of like a Eastern collectivist mindset versus a Western individualistic mindset, not to get too philosophical about it.
Bring out the Lee thesis next.
But I think these things do exist. I think these things do influence the characters and the creators from these different types of backgrounds and environments. And I think, what's the word? I don't know if we'll get there anytime soon, but I know that there are a lot of like queer comic writers and queer creators now who are like really, really heavily inspired by anime and manga, creating work where identity is, again, not just like a motivational, like box checking exercise, but like a real means in which to enable readers to engage with these characters and empathize and relate to them more so that you could relate to a Homelander type, for example. So I think that there's hope there, but it definitely feels to me like a sort of niche space that creators are operating in now, as opposed to like a really, really mainstream one in the Western comic book area. So
yeah,
who knows?
I guess that brings up another kind of thought in the same region, which Tezuka was the same, right? And you're talking about the anti-Nazism of Toriyama, but manga artists in particular, as creators in Japan, really grappled with the authoritarian nature of their government prior to World War II in a way that somewhere like the United States never did. Because they were the winners, they won. So their characters
we need to drop a nuke on them, yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean,
you may fire when ready.
This is the thing, right? Like, they were always trying to, I don't know, not explore isn't the right word, but Tezuka in particular was always trying to overcome or understand and look for a way out of those aspects of the culture, which I don't think many Western comics, and especially not the industry, post the point at which they stole all the properties from their Jewish creators, ever did. It's there's nothing too deep there. Just a really interesting comparison between the way those industries have developed and who were the heroes of those industries and how those heroes were treated. Because, you've got your like Kirby's and stuff in the US, and they were treated like shit,
Yeah, and I mean, like, talking about like grappling with the actions of leaders, in a lot of places in the West, I can say, like, saying that maybe we didn't have to drop nukes on Japan is a hot take still in many places, which is like insane. Like, the like the way that stuff has been taught to us, we're just kind of like, oh well, the like past a certain point of like leftist generally, there's like when you get like more to liberals and all, it's like, oh well, it was bad but they needed to end the war, right? Which is like entirely based on fabrications and like lies. But there hasn't been this larger cultural reckoning with it, I find.
Yeah, I wonder.
So yeah,
like there's the kind of stuff where I'm like, I should go back and write a thesis on this. I'd love to. That would be fantastic. It's my dream is to go back and like just properly do this shit.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to.
It is very interesting to compare the reaction to Hiroshima and Nagasaki against the reaction to 9/11. Like your country being attacked and what resulted out of that culturally. And there are a lot of like material reasons for it, but it's kind of fascinating that there's almost like a not quite a guilt industry, but for whatever you want to call it, even though Japan didn't really have an effective denazification because the United States wanted to put former war criminals in charge of its one party. That Operation Paperclip, baby. That at least the artists really grappled with that, whereas what we saw in the United States after 9/11 was courtesy of the red, white, and blue.
There's this really bizarre.
Rest in peace.
There's this really bizarre run of superhero comics called Ultimates. Like it's Ultimate Avengers, and it's 3 volumes, I think. And they end up like going offshore and fighting Middle Eastern superheroes. It gets so fucked up, man. It's the most bizarre shit, and you're just like, wow, this really is just. This is where, like, I remember very clearly that this is where I diverged from Western comics. It was, I think I was 19 or something, and I was like, I'm only going to go and find specific story arcs written by authors I like at this stage, because this is their flagship property at the moment, and it is they're not even trying to pretend it's not propaganda, right? Like, it was. Let's not get too much into this stuff though. We're here for a reason. I did want to. We are heading towards 9 o'clock NZT. I wanted to talk about, I guess, the future. So we've talked about Toriyama, where he came from, kind of what impact he's had, and his legacy. What are we looking at now? What is that legacy, and who do you think's out there that's waiting to pick the torch up? Can that person exist in the current age? Like Tezuka and Toriyama both were creating during periods of significant change in the way that media was produced and distributed. Is there even the possibility for someone like Toriyama to exist again in the current moment?
You mean, is there mass culture anymore?
No, I mean, no, I don't mean that.
No.
Yeah,
because clearly there is, and there could be someone who's a huge breakout hit, right? But would they signal such a significant shift, or are we too? Is everything distributed too quickly and at a scale too large these days? And stuff just left to fail or otherwise, for it to happen again, unless there's another kind of breakthrough distributed technology that comes into play.
I can't believe I'm going to say this on a tribute stream about Toriyama, but Stephen Jay Gould has this really interesting phrase. He was an evolutionary biologist who was also a Marxist. He says, I'm kind of less interested in the particular folds of Einstein's brain. If you recall, like when Einstein died, his brain was taken from him and put in for study or whatever. He said, I'm less interested in the particular folds of Einstein's brain than I am that people of equal talent have lived and died in sweatshops. And I think we live in an age in which being an artist is seen as a hobby or a luxury and not worth supporting because the wiring of the state's been stripped out.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of lifestyle that it requires to have enough people who are working and have the luxury to be able to explore their creativity rather than having to like slave away, you know, in the service industry, all these young people supporting, you know, the increasingly large population of boomers who refuse to die. All of those people, they just don't have the time to be able to think. I think we have this mythology crafted rather insidiously that poverty somehow assists your art because it's a form of suffering, but truly it's downtime that does. It's the ability to not have to worry about where your bread is coming from or your rice is coming from that lets you do that, right? And we really don't have that anymore, and we don't have the kind of state support as it existed, and we don't have the philanthropy either because, you know, the billionaires aren't afraid anymore. Like, they don't have to placate us by creating cultural heritage sites. They're just like, fuck you, you can't do anything. You know, you look at like the Silicon Tech Valley bros, they have no sense of trying to be an Andrew Carnegie, you know, where they placate the populace with their vast wealth by nurturing artists and having patronage. We don't even have that anymore. So can a Toriyama exist? Probably, but many of the people who could be a Toriyama may never be able to actually realize that in themselves because of the way things are materially, is what my answer is to that.
Man, that's fucking bleak. That's bleak as hell.
Yeah.
Did you know that we used to have an artist benefit in this country?
Yeah. That's what the pop culture, like, when we used to do the pop culture live stream a couple of years ago with Tim and Chris, who I think is in the chat, or was in the chat earlier, would produce those for us. It was always to have artists on, and they'd be like, "Oh, so how's things changed?" Like, well, we used to have this thing called the artist benefit, or like whatever version of it existed, and we could just go and do our art for a little bit, and it wasn't great, but it was better than nothing. And now, yeah, everyone's working in a contact center.
Yeah, they used to pay you to go to teachers' college. They used to pay you to become a teacher, and now you go into debt $40,000 minimum, right?
Jeez.
And you want to ask what kind of society is going to come out of that, creatively speaking. It's like, well, it's also, not to get even further bleak, but it is absolutely to the advantage of fascists that we don't have artistic freedom as much anymore, and we don't have as much of that. Like, that is absolutely like the death of imagination is the death of belief in a future world, which means that everybody turns to death drive, right? It turns into that we are hurtling towards being kamikaze fighters, you know, because there's nothing else. It's just despondency and turning towards that kind of, you know, violence inward toward the metropole and othering other people and that deterioration of community. If you can't imagine what a better world looks like, how can you fight for anything that's worth something?
That just makes me want today's Toriyama even more, right? Like, like, how do you? There are inflection points there, right? There are moments that can be grasped, and I guess similarly, I don't want to kind of fall back on this great person theory kind of hopium that some amazing person's going to come and like create the thing that wakes everyone up and like, oh no, we're hurtling towards fascism. And look, this piece of art that is being done teaches us that immediately somehow, magically. But you know, it is not only the talent of a person; it's also the moment they inhabit, and how they're able to change that moment into something new. And we've certainly got plenty of those kind of moments coming up, I imagine.
Famously, Kurt Vonnegut said that every respectable artist in the United States was focused on ending the Vietnam War. It was like a laser beam, and it had about the approximate effect of a pie being dropped from a ladder. So I think if what you're saying is like, we'll change the world that way. Yeah, I have to agree with Vonnegut. That's not how it works. However, as for like the imagination of people, guess what was happening at the same time is suddenly you see queer artists who were making underground zines with each other. And that directly leads into people's imagination being expanded for queer liberation, as it happens in the 70s and the 80s, and even into till today. You want to see some of the best electronic artists who are working today? They're trans girls. Like, it's not a coincidence that subaltern cultures create this stuff. Jazz comes from Black America. You know, that's the true American art form. So I think it does expand people's horizons in a way, and it's more about imagining that future world, right? And it can seem really bleak, but I think, again, about something that Ursula K. Le Guin said very famously, which is, you know, capitalism seems like it will last forever. It seems like it's immovable, but then so is the divine right of kings. And nobody believes that anymore. And it just ended, you know? So...
Yeah. To be stupider about that, capitalism seems like it'll last forever, but also if you move somewhere and, like, say I'm an American, so, you know, you don't have a microwave, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get one eventually, and then eventually you go 2-3 weeks, and then you just don't have one for like forever. it seemed unthinkable, but then something changes and you don't have it, and it's like, oh well. Never have to go back to this, actually. It's fine. I can use a kettle to heat up water instead of a microwave, a thing some Americans...
sorry.
What are you saying?
Sorry.
No, just that was intentionally aimed at New Zealand audiences to just totally break their brains.
You're using a microwave.
Yeah,
this is the thing my parents do. This
is how they make tea. Is they heat up water in a microwave.
Kyle, I'm gonna need you to stop talking.
Stop! What the fuck?
Sorry, sometimes I just know too much.
Yeah,
that's a true eldritch abomination.
Is this like a commonplace American thing? I have boned many American people and never had to experience this for myself. Like, I've never been in someone's...
I mean, generally people aren't using a microwave while being boned. I'm just like putting that out there.
Yeah.
This is just telling me that they were bad at aftercare.
I've never like finished and then been like, want some tea, and then gone to a microwave.
What American's gonna say that? They're not Brits. Who classically, who everyone knows, bone and then have a cup of tea.
I'm always nutting raw and saying, "Would you like some tea?" Constantly. That's actually my finishing move. It's my fatality.
Actually, you go for
bag?
coffee, Simon.
Loose leaf is definitely gonna be. I feel like Simon's like a bag kind of dude.
A bag?
Yeah, like tea, loose leaf or bag.
Tea bag? What?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay.
They call me the Uncle Iroh of sex.
Stop.
Because I'm heating up their ass.
Avatar.
I have, absolutely. I had this. I'll keep it in my pocket, but I had an Avatar-based Mike Hosking rant about all the news people losing their jobs.
Fantastic. Oh. Let's see that on the TikTok in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much. Toriyama. What a legend.
What a guy.
What a legend.
What a guy. Something else I want to point out is his name is Toriyama. What that means is, because it's named after land features, his family were peasants. They were not from aristocratic stock. He is a common person, and he is a common folk hero. So,
yeah, fantastic.
Literary corner.
Nice.
An old Johnny Appleseed.
Johnny Appleseed.
Nobody knows what that is.
Yeah, I mean, they should.
He's a Paul Bunyan.
Yeah.
I think
various other Canadian icons.
Like, underrating him at this point.
Yeah, maybe slightly.
And here's a question, I guess, to end things up. Are there any Toriyama quotes? Because there are none for me that immediately spring to mind. Apart from
he has
it's over 9,000.
I'm sorry.
Right.
He has this really interesting interview in Wired magazine where he goes, and this got flanderized even further in the American dub, where, you know, when Goku turns Super Saiyan, he's like, I am Light, I am Superman, whatever it is. You know, he makes this big speech like that. He doesn't do that in Japan. His speech is very qualitatively different. And something that's really interesting is Toriyama says, what happened, what Toei did and what the writers did when they made it animated is they made Goku into kind of a hero. And he's like, he's not really a hero. Like, he's my viewpoint character, or rather, stuff happens to him. But there's, and I really love this quote. He says, there are bits of poison that slip in and out of sight. And I've been turning that quote over in my mind for the last few years because I understand what he means. But if I put it into words, I think I'll automatically railroad it down into one meaning. But I just really love that. He says he's not Superman and he's not a hero. The quality of Goku is that he's got these bits of poison that slip out in and out of sight. Like he's not an archetype, but he's a person, but he's not like anybody you know. And his morality is not like black and white or like good or evil. It's like blue and orange, you know? And that teaches us something about ourselves because it's not we're joining a camp and our camp is the good side because, you know, it's like that, or almost like something which dissembles nationalism in a way, because it doesn't make any sense anymore to do that.
Yeah, I think I did hear. I think in that same vein, I think it was when they were adapting Dragon Ball for its many different anime arcs. I think Toriyama, I think it was an interview that he gave somewhere where he was basically saying that he was actually quite frustrated that the anime adaptations were portraying Goku to be like more heroic than how he was originally designed for the manga, because Goku is not supposed to be like a hero Superman type character. He was supposed to be someone who could have a relationship with someone. He was supposed to be someone who could be like a father. And there were all these other aspects to him. And like, you know, strong, superpowered hero was only one of the many facets of Goku. And I think that often we can kind of forget that when we look at anime like this. You know, everyone always goes, oh, like Luffy is the hero of One Piece, like Goku is the hero of Dragon Ball. But, you know, those creators, and I'm sure the creators themselves of other franchises too, see that as a limitation almost for us to be like, oh, Toriyama designed this heroic figure and this heroic protagonist is who we should all relate to. And that's not the case. And as Simon said, those bits of darkness or those points of difference that Goku has as a character, which he was always really, really staunch by having represented. I think that's what made Goku so relatable and so engaging, is that Toriyama himself was so invested in Goku being portrayed to be a flawed character. And that was really important. Yeah.
Yeah, he's almost like, I'm sure he wouldn't put this in terms as cheesy as this, but like Goku is not the hero of Dragon Ball. You, the reader, are the hero of Dragon Ball, because Goku always wants to get stronger and always wants to overcome a challenge. And what he's saying to you is, you got to do this too. You've got to overcome challenges. This is weirdly inspiring for built bodybuilders and weightlifters the world over. Goku is an icon to them, but he's also an icon to, like, you know, like the poorest like Mexican kid who lives in Mexico, you know, like because you are the person who is a subject you're interpolated into the comic as well, you know.
Yeah, I'm seeing a quote because I weirdly haven't personally seen very many Toriyama quotes, but one that I'm finding again and again is pretty much what you said, Simon. Tackle life with as much energy as Goku. I'll try to do this, or I'll try to do the same. You know, that sort of, that wording might be less corny in the original Japanese too. I have no idea.
No, but it's great, right? Like it was it's the narrative and the characters and the moments that people take with them. More than it is like the snappy dialogue or a particular combination of words. Well, I think that's us for the evening. Thank you so much for joining me, my expert panel.
Of course. Thank you for having us.
Because I
thank
couldn't
you for
have
having
done
me. Happy to deal psychic damage to you.
Amen.
Fantastic. And thank you to our audience. Thank you for chiming in. And we got one. Someone else was going to do a quote, and then they did the same quote.
Oh yeah.
I guess they're like a little bit behind us because there's a delay. Yeah. Sorry, Rockbreaker. Alas and alack. Yeah,
Wait.
spiritually, you got ahead of us. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Everyone has come along to share in this tribute. And maybe we'll do some more pop culture stuff in the future. This has been a lot of fun. It's been good to be back on the live stream and talking comics.
Yay.
That's us. If you want to follow our politics, don't.
I've got one more quote.
We got one more quote. We got one more quote. Well,
Which I think, which sort of undercuts the cult of genius, and I think speaks to what you were talking about, Kyle.
okay, are you going to do this quote, and we're going to hard cut? That's going to be it.
Yeah, Toriyama traces his origins as an artist to his elementary school days. Even today, he remembers the first time his drawing began to really come together. My first memory of a satisfactory drawing was that of a horse, he says, which, like, fuck you. Horses are really hard, man. If you could do that as a primary schooler, fuck you. I still remember it. I knew I got the joints right. I've always liked to draw, he continues. When I was little, we didn't have many forms of entertainment like we do today, so we were all drawing pictures. In elementary school, we were all drawing manga or animation characters and showing them to each other. But when asked if this early self-made training in drawing is what led to his current career as a manga artist, Toriyama is skeptical. Perhaps, he says, I just kept on drawing. We all start out with around the same drawing skills, don't we? I started to do portraits of friends and whatnot, and I just thought, drawing is fun.